Not every story is complete without a love story. So, as organisms started the process of photosynthesis and releasing free oxygen, our next character is born. Oxygen. In our story, her name is Olga. You see, Olga fell in love with Fernando. Fernando fell in love with Olga. Olga's breath, so sweet and divine. Fernando's heart in a rhythmic chime. They dance together in a fiery blend. A love story where elements transcend. This is not a story about me, no. This is not even a story about the steel knife that I have in my hand, no. This is not even about the thousands of grains in a small portion of this knife, no. This is not even a story about the billions and billions of iron atoms in a small portion of this microstructure. No, this is a story about one iron atom, one, Fe, and in our story, his name is Fernando. You see, Fernando grew up in Brazil, but we'll get to that. Chapter 1, where was Fernando born? Like every other iron atom that is there, Fernando was born in a star. A star just like our sun. In fact, 4 times bigger than our sun. Hydrogen compressed to form helium, helium forming carbon, and oxygen forming silicon. And the last element to form at the heart of a star is Fernando, the iron atom. And then the star explodes. A beautiful array of colors all over the universe because elements are scattered everywhere. Fernando is flipped out into space. For the next few billion years, Fernando spends his time in space, floating around all the corners of the universe. But ultimately, gravity acts on Fernando, and he's pulled towards a massive rock, a rock beautiful in color, blue, green, white, a rock that we call Mother Earth. Fernando finds himself in Brazil, and that's where he spends his childhood. Teenage and adult Fernando. Now, not every story is complete without a love story. So, as organisms started the process of photosynthesis and releasing free oxygen, our next character is born. Oxygen. In our story, her name is Olga. You see, Olga fell in love with Fernando. Fernando fell in love with Olga. And they lived together happily for billions of years in Brazil. Well, they're not exclusive to each other. It's more like a non-hierarchical polyamory relationship. It's 3 Olgas and 2 Fernandos, Fe2O3, Fe3O4. But let's not complicate things. Let's just talk about this love relationship between Fernando and Olga. Now, we as humans, we started taking things from the ground, we processed them, we utilized them. You know, this led to, let's say, the Copper Age, and then the Bronze Age, and then about 1000 BC, the Iron Age, which led to steel. And producing steel much later on led to industrial revolutions. We could produce better utensils, make buildings, IKEA door hinges, and whatnot. So how do we extract steel from this love affair? And to be honest, in weight percentages, Fernando is 70, Olga is just 30. And in steel, there is no Olga. No Olga at all. So how do we break this relationship? Here comes our next character, carbon. And in our story, his name is Charlie. You see, Charlie secretly loves Olga. So we as humans, we put all of them into a big boiling pot, what we call the blast furnace in the steel industry, at high temperatures. And finally, Charlie runs away with Olga. And Fernando is left all alone. What we can do is we can spice up Fernando, add a few things here or there, and we get steel. Everyone is happy, but here lies the problem. Charlie, Olga, Olga, Charlie, carbon, oxygen, oxygen, carbon, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. Steel industry produces the carbon dioxide. So we come to our last chapter, changing Fernando's breakup. 3 billion tons of iron ore is extracted every year to produce 1.8 billion tons of steel. Now, as I said, to produce steel, we produce carbon dioxide. That's 3.2 billion tons of CO2 every year. The steel industry is responsible for 7.2% of all the carbon emissions in the world. And we need steel. Steel is everywhere. Whatever we touch, we need steel. And the projection is that in a few years, we're going to produce 2.8 billion tons of steel. That's a lot of CO2. Thankfully, steel is highly recyclable. You can put it into a big pot, use electricity, work some magic, get steel again. And you can get on and on and on and on and on. But that doesn't give us the requirements for steel. So we have to find a way to break the relationship of Fernando and Olga in a slightly different way. So there's a lot of research and equipment being created right now to replace Charlie. And here comes our last character, hydrogen, in our story, Hugo. Hugo also loves Olga. So we can put it into a big pot with some electricity. Since it's recyclable, we can also put some steel. And at the end, Hugo runs away with Olga, and we get steel. There are equipments that use the Charlie system right now, and we are moving to equipments that use the Hugo system. There's a catch. What's the price of converting this system? 900 million to 2.5 billion euros, just for one system. How many equipments do we have in Germany? 13. In Europe, 54. 54 into 2.5 billion euros. That's almost the cost of just decarbonizing the steel industry in Europe. A huge number. So the government is involved. We need us to be proactive in asking for green steel. We would, of course, pay a lot more. We'll get there. We'll get there in a few years. But anyway, to end this slam, I've written a small song we could sing along. It's about this love affair. It's slightly different because it's taken from a band called Tenacious D. I've changed the lyrics a little bit, so we can sing along. Huh? Okay. Olga's breath, so sweet and divine. Fernando's heart in a rhythmic chime. They dance together in a fiery blend. A love story where elements transcend. Sometimes you got to split. Sometimes you gotta admit. Sometimes Charlie says, hey, I'm gonna love you softly. I'm gonna bond with you gently. I'm gonna escape with you sweetly. And then I'm gonna dance with you discreetly. And then you say, hey, what's your emissions? And then you say, wait a second, goodness, I think there's pollution in the air. Could you clean it up for me? That's freaking awareness.